Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April 8th meeting of Walpole Select Board. It is now 7 o'clock, the posted time of our meeting, so I call the meeting to order. Let's all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is a public hearing at 7:05, and since it's a published meeting for 7:05, we can't really start until that time. So what I want to do is move ahead to the, let's do unfinished business. Jim, you want to talk through the town meeting articles?
Sure. So just a few items outstanding. The budget, which the Finance Committee voted favorable action, 1300. I outlined the motion. Total amount here is $124,843,890. Recommend favorable action on that one.
Any questions for Jim on the budget? Okay, have a motion, please.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 3.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0-0.
Next few articles up is Articles 10 through 16, which are the zoning amendments. The first one up is the floodplain article. I think Patrick had come in and presented all of these for you. Finance Committee voted favorable action on all of these articles. There were multiple abstentions on them, and the reasons the members abstained is they wanted to wait until Planning Board had their public hearing, which is going forward. Actually happened this past Thursday evening. So, yeah.
Okay, any questions on any of the zoning articles for Jim? All right, let's just go right through them. Mark?
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 10, floodplain article.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion for Article 11, zoning amendment. Sorry, I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 11.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 12, zoning amendment.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion for favorable action for Article 13, also a zoning amendment.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion on Article 14 for favorable action, also a zoning amendment.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 15, zoning amendment.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion for favorable action on Article 16, ADU article.
Second.
And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0. So that takes care of all of them, right?
We are all done, yes.
Okay, good. So that's great.
And just for people in the room, we've talked about these articles multiple times over the past couple of months. So even though we went through them quickly, we've discussed all of them multiple different times.
And the Finance Committee has done likewise. We always wait until after the Finance Committee vote before we take a vote. Okay, I've got 7:05. Next up, we have a public hearing for some street acceptances, Boyden Lane, Echo Way, Bubbling Brook Road, and Portland Way. Could I have a motion to open?
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0. We're now in a public hearing. Jim, you want to take us through
Sure.
these?
So what you have here this evening is four roads to lay out the public ways. This is a formalized process where the board has to vote for this. It's generally referenced at town meeting. You have 4 roads being considered: Boyden, Echo, Bubbling Brook, and Portland. Enclosed in your packets is a map initially of the whole town showing where exactly those roads are, a zoomed-in version, and then an even closer version of the roadways themselves. It's my understanding Planning Board's already held their public hearing for Boyden Lane, voted to release everything, release the bond. They are set to hold their public hearings on Echo, Bubbling Brook, and Portland later on this month. And Carl, you have anything really to add on this one?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and to the town administrator, yes, Carl Waldo, town engineer.
There were a few outstanding items here. One of them was complete on Portland Way. There was some street trees. It really is not a requirement of the selectmen to have street trees, but it is of the planning board. That was completed yesterday. And there's a driveway issue up at Bubbling Brook Road. That's scheduled to be repaired approximately on the 15th. So when these go, hopefully, all these items, I noted to you that we were still gelling a few things when I was back here in March, and hopefully they'll be complete. So I'm recommending you move forward with this.
With all four.
Yes.
So just if I could follow up on
Sure.
that. So town council and I discussed this towards the end of last week, and I kind of ran through these two specific issues with her. She advised that in her opinion, in general, the town does lose some leverage when town meeting accepts the way, while there are still some outstanding issues in the roadway. So there's been some development since I wrote this, I think it was on Thursday, and since today, I believe the trees might have been going in today, were they?
Yesterday, actually, yeah.
So ultimately, it's up to the select board whether to decide to move forward with laying out the public way, which you're considering tonight. You could either go forward with all four streets because they're one article, or separate them out into separate motions, and town meeting, you could just recommend move forward with one or all four of them, so.
So there still are outstanding items, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So one of the things we could do is accept the ones that there are no outstanding items on, at your recommendation, Carl. We could theoretically hold the public hearing open and handle these at our next meeting, correct?
I think you could. But council's watching tonight, so let me text with her where the board debates.
Okay, all right.
I also believe you could, if you chose to. The next meeting is not too late. There is a statutory time requirement that the layout be completed 7 days before town meeting. Now, you don't have a meeting on the 29th or the 22nd that I'm aware of. So if you got too late, it would be too close to town meeting.
Yeah, our next one is the 15th, so a
Right.
week from today.
It could be. It could be continued until that time, or
So-
one of them, whatever it is. Essentially, there's no issues with Echo and Boyden at all.
Right, we could vote those. It's the other two I'm concerned about. So let me open it up to the board for other comments and any concerns with voting the other two, or would your preference be to wait?
Well, our meeting is on the 15th?
It is, yeah.
And you said something was scheduled to happen on the 15th? Did I hear that right?
Yes.
So would we have the information, we would presumably that day, the trees is being installed, is that what you said, or the driveway is being
No,
repaired?
driveway is repair on the Bubbling Brook.
Okay, if it's a one-day job, then it would be done that one day, and we would have that information. Is that what your concern is, or your
That's,
consideration?
I just don't like having outstanding items as we vote these things.
If town-
We lose a lot of leverage when we do that.
No
So-
one does, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for all this confusion, and it was very difficult to schedule all this, and one meeting is ahead of the other here and whatnot.
Right.
This got ahead of us. It's very difficult to coordinate with all the boards, and then to manage to convince everybody to get everything done.
Right.
So I've already gotten confirmation. You can do that. You can either
Okay.
continue the hearing until then, or you can vote to lay out two of them now and continue the other two to next week, if that's what you prefer.
So let's just think about, because the last opportunity we would have is next Tuesday night, based on what Carl said in the 7-day rule with town meeting and, our meeting schedule. So what will we know? We know the driveway. We think we'll know the answer to that by the time we come back together on the 15th. Is there anything else outstanding, and will we have those answers?
One relatively significant step, and that would be the planning board's vote. Their residence hearing is on the 17th, at which time they would vote to release the bond funds and then basically recommend that the acceptance proceed to you.
So us voting ahead of the planning board vote, is that problematic?
Somewhat unorthodox.
Yeah, feels that way.
Unfortunately, that's the way this ended up schedule-wise.
Should the work have been done? Like, should we be looking to the contractor here and say the work should have been done so that we wouldn't have this issue?
Of course, these roads have been essentially complete since 2022. Everything should have been completed a long time ago.
So I'm not sure why we should be taking on the risk
Understood.
And if we did not vote to accept one or two of these streets, when would the next opportunity be for that?
The fall.
And any issue with that?
Other than having to repeat the process, not really. These have been around a long time. I really was responsible for pushing them. I want to get them accepted. I
Yeah.
don't want them hanging. And we get to put them on our Chapter 90 list and bring them home, so to speak.
And
The
yet at the
longer they
same-
remain, the more trouble there is, or the more chance that it'll just slip into the cracks.
Okay. Let me open it up to the board for questions or comments. Other members, thoughts?
Sure, so the only one that has an issue is the Bubbling Brook driveway. Otherwise, the other three are set,
Pretty much.
and they just have to have this planning board hearing. Okay. I mean, in the interest of the folks getting this work done on Bubbling Brook, I think it would behoove us to ensure that that happens, right? Not only for ourselves and for the town, but for these folks that want to have their road be in the correct shape. So I would be, is there a avenue of communication to speak with the contractor and have that finished before the 15th?
There is, and the contractor is present in this room, should you wish to speak to him.
Okay.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Sir,
Come up to the microphone, please.
my name's Andrew Adams, I'm a developer over at Bubbling Brook. You know, truthfully, it was a miscommunication. The driveway that, you know, needs to be repaired. My client was put in a pool at the time, like over a year and a half ago, and he didn't want to do the top coat of the driveway. He kind of took responsibility for that, and you know, when we addressed this probably 6-7 months ago, you know, the berm at the top of the driveway never got done. It was kind of like a miscommunication, and that's kind of like where we're at right now. So
What's the likelihood that you'll have the work done by the 15th?
it's going to get done, 100%.
About before the 15th? Because that's how I'll really know it got done.
I'm trying my best. I really am. But I can guarantee it's going to get done before, you know, the 15th meeting. So.
Could we do a contingent vote? She just got back to me and said, you can certainly, she said, don't close the public hearing if there's additional information coming in, which there will
Yeah,
be
right,
additional
right.
information coming
Yeah.
in. So she said you can continue this one.
So I think that's what we should do, is continue the meeting. Are we good to accept the other three, Carl,
Yes,
tonight?
yes.
Okay. And then I think what we would do is wait to get confirmation that you've gotten the work done to Carl's satisfaction.
Sure.
That's important, to Carl's satisfaction. And then we would hold the public hearing open until next week and take a vote then. And you're
Okay.
sure you can get it done by the 15th?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a significant meeting down there with Carl and the resident, and I know it's at stake, so I'm going to make sure it's going to get done.
Okay. Comments from the board?
So my only other comment then would be, so the planning board public hearing for all four of these then is later in April, right? So what would arise between us voting on it on the 15th and that planning board public hearing? Would other people come forward? Would other homeowners come forward with issues, or what could happen there? What complications could arise? Otherwise, I'm fine with voting it tonight. I just don't know what, you know.
Yeah, I hear you.
So that's an excellent question. And of course, we won't know till those hearings open up, although the one resident that's come forward, there's been some other email communications from a resident on Portland Way, but the resident at Bubbling Brook came forward both when the selectmen's notice went out and when the planning board's notice went out, so that we were aware and able to, as Andrew described, go out and meet, all of us, my department, Andrew, and the resident, go out and meet and come to agreement at what needed to be done. So I can't predict the future.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this sequence is topsy-turvy right now. So I agree, this is, it's a bit difficult, but I guess the liability would be that the process would have to be repeated in the fall if there were issues that couldn't be resolved as a result of those hearings.
Gotcha. Okay.
This will never happen again.
Anyone else? So I'm going to suggest that we continue the public hearing until next Tuesday, 7 o'clock, in this room. And our expectations will be that you'll have the work done and that Carl will have certified that. So I'm going to suggest we hold off on voting the Bubbling Brook acceptance and handle the other three, because the other three are ready to go, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay. And you got that, right? Yeah. Okay. All right, so we will not move to close the public hearing, because we're going to keep it open, so we can move
I
to,
think we should, I think it might be necessary to close the public hearing
She said
for the,
just-
for the three, though, if we want to take action on them.
isn't it one public hearing? We don't have
It wasn't
four.
advertised, it was just noticed to the abutters that the time was from 7:05 for each street.
I don't want to get into a procedural wrangle here, so let's just follow town council's
Yeah.
advice, continue the meeting, and we'll deal with Bubbling Brook next week, okay?
Should I make that motion, or do we just leave it open?
Do we need to take a vote to
She
continue?
said, she said specifically to continue to a time, date, and place.
So we should do that then.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to April 15th at
7 PM in this
7
room.
PM
In this room.
in this room, at the Select Board meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0, we're continued. So now let's go through the three streets that we're ready to accept. So that's Echo, Portland, and Boyden.
So I'll make a motion to adopt the order of layout for Boyden Lane from its beginning at Station 0 plus 0 to Station 7 plus 76.73.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion to sign the order of layout documents and plans for Boyden Lane.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0.
I'll make a motion to have written layout documents and plans on file in the town clerk's office.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0.
Okay, Echo Way now. I'll make a motion to adopt the order of layout for Echo Way from its beginning at Station 0 plus 00 plus or minus to its end at Station 2 plus 51.52 plus or minus.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion to sign the order of layout documents and plans for Echo Way.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion to have written layout documents and plans on file in the town clerk's office.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
Okay, now we'll do Portland Way. I'll make a motion to adopt the order of layout for Portland Way from its beginning at Station 0 plus 00 to its end at Station 2 plus 66.27 plus or minus.
Second?
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion to sign the order of layout documents and plans for Portland Way.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0.
I'll make a motion to have written layout documents and plans on file in the town clerk's office.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 5-0. Okay, so you got the three, we'll get the fourth one next week, assuming the work's done, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
All right, next, we're going to have discussion on the Bird Pond Dam. Some quick context setting. So this has been going on for a year plus now, when we were first notified by the Division of Conservation and Recreation that the Bird Dam was failing and that it needed to be resolved in some fashion. DCR came to us with three options and funding for that. We've been examining those options in multiple meetings with DCR, multiple public forums, department head discussions among the board itself in our public meetings. So a lot of discussion over the last, 13, 14 months, whatever it's been. Most recently, we had the public forum in November, and we got a lot of input from people, many who are in the room right now. And so I thought it important, since a few months have gone by, and since a lot more work has been done on this, I thought it important that we provide an opportunity for public input once again, and that'll be the part of what we'll do tonight. So the way tonight will run is this: we want to review with four of our department heads what their findings and recommendations are. What they're going to do is, and actually, Jim, I think you wanted to say this part, so let me turn it over to you, so your department heads.
That's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
So what we're going to do is, I had a series of questions that I sent out to the various department heads back in November and December, asking them basically to weigh on some of these issues that came up back in November. So with this, we're going to start with DPW Rick Mattson, on to Carl Baldoff, Town Engineer, Patrick Duchesne's our Community Development Director, and Landis Hershey, our Conservation Agent. What we're going to be looking for is about 2-minute brief overview from each department head. Select Board can ask your questions of them, and then we'll kind of run through, and then we'll hand it back to the Select Board if that works for you.
So that's the way we want to do it. Following that, what we'll do is open up for public input. And I'll say this again when we get to that point, but we spent 2+ hours in November getting public input. So what I want to avoid tonight is a redo of that. So what I'm going to be asking for is people who have new things to say, things that weren't said in November, come up and say those things so we can incorporate that into our thought process. So that's the way we'll run it. And so, Rick, I think you're first up in the batting order, so we turn it over to you. Thank you.
You. For the record, Rick Mattson, Director of Public Works. As you have stated, this is a process that's been going on for some time. Based on the information that we've all received from the DCR, we know that our options to address the issue with the dam are pretty limited. I looked at this purely from a Public Works perspective and flood mitigation. So, based on all the information that I heard at those at the meetings, the public input, it's my opinion and my belief that the best available option to the town of Walpole is to modify the spillway and armor the dam. Keep the dam in place, and it's not necessarily a removal of the spillway, it's a modification. The spillway remains because you need to let the water out naturally, right? So I looked at it in terms of negative impacts downstream with the Washington Street Bridge and all the other issues that we could potentially create downstream if we did something that was along the lines of removing the dam, which should have never been even discussed. So again, in my opinion, the best option for the town to address the issue with that dam is to modify the spillway and armor the dam, repair the dam, and modify the spillway. That'll give us the best option for flood control, which is my main concern.
And as you looked at that, when I think about the written, just so everyone knows, the department heads have given us extensive written write-ups, which we've all read. I didn't want to go through that in gory detail. It didn't seem like a good use of time. But a question from what you wrote, you talk about the hydraulics in the culvert and against the Washington Street Bridge. Could you just touch on that again, Rick?
Sure. So the more water that we release in an uncontrolled manner is going to put excessive, undue force on the downstream side, which is the Washington Street Bridge. It's stone arch. It's pretty old. Hydraulically, if we were to release too much water in an uncontrolled manner, it would have negative impacts.
Okay. That's really the only question I have for you, Rick. Let me open it up to the rest of the board. Questions for Rick? Ben?
I had one, and Rick, thanks for the write-up here, and it's the same with everybody. I know everyone did a lot of work and research on this, so I appreciate it. And I think this question is going to be something that I'll ask of everybody as we go through here. And think about the fact that we have dams in Walpole now. We have Turner Pond Dam, and there's many of them. And we perform inspections on those. We perform some maintenance on those. It seems to me, and I haven't visited every single dam, that most of those are considerably smaller in scope than the Bird Pond Dam. And so I guess my questions as we go through here will be, if the dam, obviously the dam needs to stay, and if we do go with a spillway that allows the pond to remain, that brings up a couple other issues that we may touch on tonight, but were touched on previously. If we were able to adjust the spillway as we do with some others. And obviously with smaller dams, it's simply taking a piece of wood out and putting it in, which is likely not the case here, although maybe Carl, I'd ask you about that a little more. How does that work then with what the DPW is doing now in terms of, managing those other dams or performing maintenance or raising or lowering the spillways at those other dams?
So that is an option that I don't believe DCR brought forward.
Right.
And Carl and I have talked about this, putting some sort of control measure in.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't go with the old outdated option of boards.
Yeah, neither would
If we
I.
were to take that approach, I would request that they did some kind of mechanical valving or something
Right.
that would allow us
Right.
to release the water on a controlled basis.
Yeah, right. And the other thing that would accomplish is, I know one of the things we had talked about a lot was the 500-year flood and the very grave and real concerns about overtopping the dam.
Right.
Considering the spillway could be designed in such a way that it would maybe not prevent that, but drastically reduce it, would be a big piece, I think, as well.
Yeah, it would, it's a very good control measure.
Yeah.
If you have some sort of mechanism in place to adjust your flows. It's not problematic in getting out there to do it, we just need to ensure that we get there to do it at the proper time.
Yeah, just have a
And that would be,
plan.
exactly, and that would be I guess it would depend on the size of the storm naturally, right? So we would have to have a plan in place to make sure that we made the proper adjustments to prevent any negative impacts downstream.
Right,
So we don't want someone to go down there and fully open the valve. It'd have to be very controlled.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm not crazy about introducing a aspect of human error in the whole process, but I think it's, if, you have a process in place and procedures, and that's something that would happen through the design, and we'd have to be very diligent about and talking about, but.
Yeah, the only other downside to that would be is that any kind of valving or control structure
Yeah,
would require extensive maintenance, and along with that becomes
yeah,
costs.
right, okay. Thanks, Rick.
Thank you.
Ben, other comments or questions for Rick?
I guess the one thing I would just mention for probably mostly people watching at home is, we've talked about this in the previous meetings, this has been determined to be a high-risk dam from the state's perspective. They're very worried about this dam. The logical question is, well, let's go to the owner and have them fix it. So the owner is not clear in this case. No one's been able to identify who the owner is. When they go to the record books, there are names out there of people who likely don't exist. So there was something going on in the past where they were trying to hide the ownership of the dam. And so that's the point at which we're in. The state is willing to spend some amount of money, I think $4 or $5 million has been bandied about, to either stabilize the dam and keep it a dam, or to stabilize the dam to cover a 500-year flood and lower the spillway so it would become more of a meandering river as opposed to the dam that you see today. So I just wanted to interject that for people at home that haven't been part of these discussions in the past. That's why we're here. And I remember 10 years or so, the state came out with a study, what's the emergency action plan for this dam if it fails in a 500-year storm or 100-year storm. So we've been discussing this dam, not all of us because we weren't all on the board at the time, but the dam's been under discussion for a very long time, 20 years, maybe more, 30 years. So that's where we stand. That's why we're at where we're at. And we do need to give the state and let them know by the end of May what the select board would like to do. So just to interject a couple more little facts to let float. The state would like Walpole to own the dam. I think that's a bad idea to own a high-risk dam, even if it is repaired, but that's just me. Do I think the state may be willing to take ownership of the dam? Maybe. I don't know, but that's a better idea to me than have the town own a high-risk dam. So those are all the issues that we're dealing with. We've had a lot of discussion in the past. Today's a public hearing to get more input. And then over our next few meetings before the end of May, we're going to try to reach a decision on what we're going to recommend to the state that be done to this dam. So I just want to give a little more background in case anybody hadn't, read up on those previous meetings, so.
So just if I could, Mr. Chairman, one other thing. There was a comment made at one of the public meetings that the pond was necessary for our public water supply, and that is not true. I just wanted to be clear on that. It's whether we change this to a meandering river or keep it a pond, it'll have no effect on our water supply.
Okay, thanks, Rick. Thanks, Mark. Anybody else? Okay, we got next up, Jim?
Carl?
Carl. Hello again?
Good evening again to the chair and members. Carl Baldoff, Town Engineer. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I agree with the DPW Director's summary. In my narrative, I also recommended the spillway removal / lowering. I'll note that there's one, and I wrote this, and I proofed it. And when I say crest in that paragraph, it should be spillway. We don't want to lower the crest. That's the top of the dam. All right, so I won't, it's well summarized. There are issues downstream with the bridge, Washington Street Bridge, scouring essentially. At some point, that masonry stops, and underneath it is soil. The more water you push through it, the more the velocity of the river goes, the more the risk of the undercutting and scouring. That's basically pretty simple, although not obvious maybe. Ben, you'll have to ask your question again because I don't have a very good memory.
No, that's okay. It was actually your comments in here, Carl, that had kind of started me down this path, but talking about the work that the town does to inspect the other dams in town, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you could go ahead and explain it, but it's an annual process or semi-annual process.
Yeah, I'll elaborate briefly. All right, so the town is 4 or 5 jurisdictional dams. We have 2 that are actually high hazard, Allen and Cobb's, because in high hazard is what's below it. All right, if there's obviously quite a few houses below Allen, et cetera. They have to be inspected every 2 years. The medium every 5 and the low every 10. The only low, I believe, is the one behind the high school, and it's not in great shape. But anyway, those are the inspection schedules. It costs us about $5,000 a dam to do the inspections. There's also what they call an emergency action plan. So it's a pretty thick document. It outlines what happens if the thing starts to fail. They all have emergency action plans. I don't have it. There's actually one for the Bird Dam that was done by DCR, but the point is they need to be updated every year,
Yeah.
and that also costs us, I think we're updating the 4 of them for about $8,000 a year. So there's an annual consultant cost that goes with these things every year. So those are costs that we're taking care of now. That's through our budget. Or the engineering budget.
Yep.
So it's not we're not alien to the process we have for it's happening now. I'm not sure I'm advocating that another one be put on there, but that's what you would be doing. I think the big problem with owning another dam would be the long-term capital cost. The carrying costs, Rick mentioned, the more elaborate the systems are for it, then the more we have to mow them like Allen Dam is mowed by us. There's obviously keep the spillways clear. There's not a lot else that goes on with them. But at some point, and you realize that we've appropriated money to repair Allen Dam, there's going to be a big capital cost for this in the future. So obviously that should weigh in any decision as well, and I know the board has considered all that. So,
Okay.
And as far as the design of the spillway and whatnot, all dams have some type of a planned overtopping mechanism, an emergency spillway, so that when the spillway fills up and reaches capacity, it gets to the top. We want a plan where it goes over, and it goes over in an area that's armored. And according to the modeling in the report, it will go over in the 500-year storm.
Yeah.
So that needs to be planned, and there'll be an area for the dam that will do that. And just one other point of clarification, removing the spillway, and Rick addressed this very well, removing the spillway and lowering the spillway, in this case, are the same thing. There has to be a defined structure for the water to go through. Right now, it goes over it, and there's a pretty good drop that goes on as it makes its way into the tunnel, the culvert underneath the building. I'm not quite sure if the spillway will be, if it's lowered to the river bottom or the pond bottom, if it will have a drop or not, but that's more of an engineering detail, but it just the two of them are really the same thing in this case.
Okay.
Good.
Carl, I was wondering if, to the best of your ability, if you could give me a brief history, as far as you know, of the pond itself and how long you think it may have been there, how long perhaps there's been an impoundment in a dam, whether it's the same dam that exists now or some form of a dam creating a pond, a bird pond.
I'm not an expert
100
on
years,
this.
200 years, I mean.
But I understand from research that was done the first time I was here, if you're aware of real estate law in Massachusetts, the Commonwealth owned the bottom of the riverbeds in the state that were navigable. That's a thing under English common law. So they did own the Neponset. They granted those rights away to Byrd a long, long time ago, sometime in the early 1800s.
Okay.
So that river bottom is now private, so they could dam it, et cetera. I've got to believe that there's been an impoundment there since sometime in the early 1800s, early, middle 1800s.
Over 200 years, potentially.
Yeah, I really don't. I searched around in our stuff. We've got a lot of things up there. I could not find any records for it. I note that there's a cornerstone on the building up there, a concrete cornerstone, that says 1795 to 1927, which leads me to believe that factory and the concrete tunnel and the configuration of the dam that it's in now probably dates back to around the late 20s.
So in the history books, I think the Earth and Sun factory is mentioned in the history books in the 1700s.
So certainly before the condos were built on Rose Court and Riverwalk. And the only reason I ask is because there is a history of having a pond here and a recreational component to the area before any homes were built, really in this area in East Walpole at all, perhaps save a few. And so, I think you'll find that I'm going to ask a few questions, perhaps when the conservation agent comes up too, about the upstream impacts, because we're talking a lot about the downstream impacts, and those are important. We want to understand the flood risks. I understand there's a modest, increased risk in not removing the spillway and repairing the dam itself. And I think I want to talk a little bit about the upstream impacts too. And so understanding that there is a pond there and that it's been there, certainly predates all of us. It's just worth the discussion. So, thanks.
Very good.
Other comments or questions for Carl? Okay.
Thank you.
Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
Got Patrick up next.
Hello, members of the board, Pat DeShanes for the record. I believe we want to kind of go over just where the development stands.
Yeah, so in your write-up, you spent a fair amount of time talking about the 40B and the implications of the decision we make and how it might relate to the 40B that's going in there. So I thought it would be helpful for you to just summarize that.
Yeah.
Given that I think it's an important element of this discussion.
Yeah, so right now, where that project is, I look at it almost as two separate projects, right? There's the 40B project, which has really been in limbo right now. It's been continued for well over a year. And the reason being is that the developer had been working on a smaller project that was going to comply with our zoning. So that smaller project, which was approved for 16 units, it was approved through the zoning board for the use. I know the developer has to meet with conservation as well as the planning board, so there's still a continued review process of that smaller project. The 40B project, as of right now, is continued until May. There's been no testimony taken on that project. It seems that while that 40B project came first, the developer is either going in a different direction or is holding on to that 40B project, not withdrawing it as a means to just have that as a backup plan. So it's kind of an odd situation. Usually, a developer comes forward with a project under the town zoning, maybe the town denies it for whatever reason, and then they come back with a 40B project. That's an option to them. Whereas in this situation, the 40B project was first, and it seems that the direction is, at least right now, with the smaller project. When this came up with the zoning board, we had town council available because it's kind of a unique situation. And so the act of continuing it right now is only really to, I guess, see how the other project plays out. And if the other project plays out, then there's no need to have the 40B, and it could be denied at that point. But happy to answer any other questions on that.
Thanks, Patrick. Questions for Patrick Glenn?
Thanks. Again, we're talking about the upstream impacts, and so I have a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
You're talking about the developer who specifically has approached me, Mr. Petrosi, and said that the town doesn't own the land where the pond is currently. That's private land. And the developer has indicated he is attempting to purchase that land, whether he's been successful or not. He certainly has, approached the landowners and has an agreement of some sort. This is, again, what he told me. I don't know this for a fact. And I don't know if you have any more information about that. And it's important, whatever your answer is, it's important whether he owns it or whether someone else owns it. Certainly, the town doesn't own it. I know that's a fact.
So as far as I'm aware, and this is information that's on the record that he provided to the zoning board, is that there is some purchase and sale agreement between the developer and the current land trust. What that is, that was not made available. What the zoning board has is really just documentation from the executor of that land trust signing over, I guess, rights to develop or rights to own that property, so to speak. I'm just trying to paraphrase there, to the developer. But that's, I guess I could give you that. I don't believe that he owns it right now, but that's just to based on my knowledge, but there seems to be a purchase and sale in place.
Well, one of the goals tonight and over the next couple of weeks is to identify open questions. And I feel like, for me, this is an open question, because if you're right, he doesn't own it currently, then that, to me, is an opportunity for us or the state to come in and take the opportunity to own the land. Because if we don't own the land where the pond is and the pond goes away, what happens to the land that is created and it's in the hands of a private developer? It's an opportunity for the town to create recreational, improve upon the already existing recreational component there. Certainly, we want to not turn it into a mucky mess. We want to turn it into a sort of an appealing place. And if we don't own the land, I think that's harder. And so that, to me, that's an open question of who owns the land. Perhaps this developer, perhaps almost this developer, which is a concern, and why not the town or the state?
Any other questions or comments for Patrick? Okay, thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
I think Landis Hershey, our conservation agent, is up next. Landis, you got the record for the longest response, for
I know.
sure, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Landis Hershey, conservation agent, and just want to say I'm looking at it sort of at a different angle. As one, the Conservation Commission has considerable land around the pond on the other side of Pinnacle Drive. The land that runs along the pond is conservation land, town land under conservation. Towards the end, the downstream side of the pond, also the conservation has land near Plimpton Pond, and then back on the other side we have Pinnacle Point. So there's a lot of land that's abutting what is currently the pond, but has always been the Neponset River. So if the spillway gets removed and the pond goes down to meandering river, it's going to really change the impacts to the conservation land. And I see one especially on the Endine Trail side, which is by the Toll Brothers subdivision. There's a lot of invasive species along the river. So my concern was invasive species is just going to move into the area, which is currently a pond, and just go rampant if it's not taken care of. And so that would be a concern. In addition, currently the trail runs along the pond, a water body, and it's enjoyable for people. It's also the 200 feet adjacent to the river is protected area by the Conservation Commission on both portions of both sides. So if the goes down to meandering river and there's land that's owned by another private entity in between the conservation land, that really changes the land. So I respect the opinion of my colleagues from the other departments, and what my memo to the select board stated was that I think the best answer is to have a modified spillway, which we've already talked about already. So if we had a modified spillway where we had some kind of mechanism to bring the pond up and down as necessary, we could retain a portion, we could retain the pond, but bring it down when we needed the storage for floodplain. And I know a lot of conservation commissions around Massachusetts do this already. I live in North Attleboro, and they do that with Falls Pond. Every year, they bring Falls Pond very, very low, just to a meandering river, and then they bring it back up. So during times where they expect a lot of rain, they have the flood storage, so they have the ability to do that. So I guess that's pretty much. So I'm concerned with the invasive species. I'm concerned with the view and the access from the conservation land adjacent to the pond. I'm concerned about potential land that will be opened up to further development. Those were my main concerns.
Thanks, Landis. Questions or comments for Landis? Glenn?
Yeah, thanks, Landis. I always appreciate and respect your opinion. If I could ask you also about the bird pond, also not being owned or controlled by the town. So when the bird pond, if it goes away, if that is one of the possibilities that we decide as a select board, and if it does go away and it creates a river and it creates land that has not been, doesn't have plantings and is sort of, again, was a pond for many, a couple centuries. I've seen some drawings from the state where they seem to propose plantings, throughout what was the pond and will be the sides of the river, the banks of the river. Do you have an understanding of how much that would cost? Do you have an understanding of how difficult that would be? Can you tell me what are the challenges of not owning and controlling the land? Are we just proposing something that we can't actually follow through on?
Short answer, cost, not really, except it would be
Yeah.
expensive.
Yeah, well, somebody else will pay for it, hopefully.
Someone
but
else
yeah.
would pay for it, the land, right? The land wouldn't be the ownership of the towns. My understanding is the person who owns that land would have to agree to anyone going on and doing plantings.
Okay.
In addition, with my review, and I did contact DER, which is the state department that does a lot of these dam removals. The state has a very robust dam removal program. They like to remove the dams. They like to bring rivers from impoundment down to meandering river. And lots of times it makes really good sense because riverine environments are great. They are good. They're good for wildlife and they're good for recreation and they have a lot of benefits. But they also, they don't know exactly what's going to happen. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, what portion's going to be upland, what portion is going to be a protectable wetlands resource, being the river or being the floodplain or being the riverfront area, the wetlands. All that is somewhat of an unknown, my understanding. So we have wetlands on the Pinnacle side, Lot 9, which is currently in the permitting process. Those wetlands could recede because they would be further away from the wetlands. And there's other wetlands that could recede. On the conservation land side near Toll Brothers, currently the 200-foot riverfront area, which is a protectable area, is on Concom land, but then it could go onto this private land. And my understanding, it's really hard to determine exactly what's going to happen there. So to answer your question, I'm not sure because it'll take a period of time once the river goes down to determine where those areas are and how to plant them. Some going to be upland, some going to be wetlands, some going to be floodplain. It's not a science right now exactly what's going to happen.
Sure, and even if we can agree that a riverine environment is perhaps ideal, we're surrounded, that dam is surrounded by dams, right? Half a mile upstream, there's a dam, the Plimpton Pond Dam, and very shortly downstream as well as a dam. So we're adding, perhaps, if that is the course that we take, a little bit of riverine environment, but how much are we really adding?
Right, and the benefit of removing, part of the benefit of removing a dam is fish passage.
I understand,
right?
yeah. That
But
makes sense.
this sleuthway is pretty wide, so
Yeah.
I bet the fish might be getting by already now, so.
Sure, and if I could just, again, we're identifying open questions, that is, to me, an open question of the state has proposed some beautiful pictures of what the environment will look like after it is returned to a river. potentially, but hasn't really talked about how they're going to access the land that they do not own or control. And so, again, going back to that same point.
Right. And to have a CR, a conservation restriction, restricting the use of the land afterwards, or have it ownership under the town, either conservation or
Right.
some other department,
Yeah.
would be the most beneficial if it becomes a meandering river.
Would make the most sense. And then one more point, too, again, going back to the cost. So I guess if the state is committed to this project, and then they get to and then they say, okay, they're going to remove the spillway, and the result is, okay, let's go do this plantings and return this to the environment that we said we would, and then they can't access it. Well, I want the state to at least give us the money and resources. I say resources, but we want the dollars that will allow us to do that at a future time. So, if it's a $5 million project, perhaps the state should be chipping in 10% of that money in an escrow or put it aside. So $500,000 should be ready to go for us to use. If the state can't do it, then we should be able to do it at a later time. But I don't want them to walk away at the end of the project, say, well, we did everything we could, but now we can't access the land, so we're going to leave you with this, again, mucky, smelly mess. So I want the state to do what they say they're going to do and sort of, put the money where their mouth is.
Anything else, Glenn?
That's it for now.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah, real quick. Hi, Landis.
Hi.
Just going back, I guess, to a little bit of the practical aspects of operating a dam, and so, we heard that the engineering department does, the inspections and the reviews, and the DPW would be responsible for conceivably some sort of a adjustable spillway if we can go that route. What role would you play or conservation play in that, in terms of determining when to adjust the spillway, or is there no role there for conservation?
I would say that would probably be up to the DPW director. Currently, we have Turner Pond and Clark's Pond, which are conservation, under the umbrella of Conservation Commission.
Oh, I see.
So we all work together. I mean,
Yeah.
we work together to go out there and look at the pond, decide when to
Yeah.
put boards in, when to take boards out, and it's a cooperative endeavor. Obviously, the safety of the town is number one, and I give that to the DPW director. There he is. So I would only give input.
Okay, thanks.
So we have had issues at both of those locations.
Yeah.
When the water's been.
Would you just come up? Thank you.
So we have had issues at both of those locations, at Turner's and Clark's.
Yeah.
When the adjustments in the board systems are not proper. In the case of the Turner Dam, the water backs up into the yards and floods the septic systems.
Yeah.
In the case of the Clark's Pond structure, the basements in the area flood. So it's something that has to constantly be watched. And as Linda said, we work very closely together, and when she gives us the word, we go out and do what we have to do. But,
Yeah, all right.
so
Thank you.
there are issues with impounding water with dams and structures.
Yeah, thanks.
And if I could just add, I agree that Rick earlier said that we would have to have a really good plan in place.
Yeah.
And not have boards.
Yeah,
Have some kind of a mechanical structure.
right, and the design of that and how it's implemented, and then the final elevations of it, a lot of questions there. Yeah.
And a plan, when do we draw it down, when do
Yeah.
we draw it up? I mean, season-wise, or if need be, if some event is coming our way.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, guys.
Anyone else?
Landis, thank you. I mean, I'm very much concerned about the land, and it was really great to hear your responses of, what happens to that land if it goes down to a river and how that changes, because it is a really unique situation where there are so many different developments nearby, conservation areas nearby, dams on either side, up and downstream. It's a lot of information. It's very complex. So
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Jim, anything that you would want to add before we?
No,
move to
only
public
that
input?
we did reach out to DCR on some of these items that Glenn had touched base on, and specifically the ownership of the pond itself, and they are standing by as of 2024. They're going by the assessor's records. They've heard the same rumors we have, that there's a developer who's pursuing the purchase of it. They're also just generally looking for a decision from the board by the end of May as to what direction does the town want to go in, and whatever direction the town, through the select board, want to go in, they'll go in that direction, whether it be new dam, open it to a riverway, whatever you folks would like. I'll make sure that this memo covers all, what everyone discussed is available online. I wanted to wait till you discussed it, until we put it out there, so everyone could see it and review it before the next meeting.
Great.
I do have another question.
Yeah.
When we met with DCR last, we also put that idea out of who would own this dam. You know, we've spoken about not knowing the owner, the town of Walpole taking on this liability. Would the state take that on? Was there any movement with that?
No, but I get the general feeling they would prefer and be more willing to be the owner of the area around if it was simply a riverway. They've made it pretty clear to me in my discussions with them and my back and forth that they really don't want to be the owners. They'll repair it, get it up. They really don't want to be the owners of another dam. So.
Okay, anything else? All right, so what we're going to do now is move to public input. And again, I do not want to get into regurgitating what got said in November. So what I'm going to ask is if anybody who spoke in November, just don't come back up and re-say what you said in November, okay? Because that's just not a good use of everyone's time. What I would like to do is focus on new information, new thinking, anything that the board should be considering as we go through the next several weeks and ultimately decide what to do. So could I just see a show of hands on who would like to speak tonight? So a handful of people. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and go to those people. And I just ask you to keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes and be very to the point. And again, avoid re-saying what got said in November. So Judy, come on up.
Good evening, I'm Judy Conroy, 455 Elm Street. I've been following this. I did have a question. The comments and the questions you asked the department heads to answer, are they available? Are they up on a website or something?
As I just stated, we are going to be publishing that
Oh, I couldn't
after
hear
this
you.
meeting.
Okay.
So I wanted the select board to review it.
Yep.
And
So
it'll be
this
put out there.
memo that
Right.
we have
Okay.
will go on the website.
Okay, I couldn't hear
Yeah,
you.
that's okay.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. It sounds like the direction is moving into modifying the spillway, keeping the dam, repairing and keeping the dam in place, and keeping the pond. Am I correct?
So that's one of the options
One of the
that we are
options.
discussing.
Okay, Mr.
Yes.
Mattson, I think was on,
That's not my preferred option.
okay. Mr. Gallivan also mentioned a high risk for owning the dam if the dam is repaired and the spillway is repaired and so forth. Is a high risk, and I don't look at that as a high risk if that were to be done. In the immediate future, I would hope that the design is state-of-the-art to last for decades, that the people in this room are not going to be the ones, unfortunately, to worry about a high risk of dam failure or spillway failure or anything like that. So I would urge the town to take the $4 or $5 million to do what it has to do with the dam and the spillway while it's still being offered by the state, and to keep it a pond and to have it controlled by DPW, conservation, and so forth. As far as development, getting closer and closer to waterways, I'm opposed to that. If you let this go to a river like it looks like on Plimpton Street, the environment changes, and if you look at plans that are available even now, building is trying to get closer and closer and closer to even the 100-year storm delineation. So I would urge you to consider the change of the land if you do decide to, let it go, okay? And as far as the ownership goes, I think there are folks in the room that might want to speak to that as far as purchases and sales and things like that. So I'd urge you to take the $4 to $5 million. I don't think the state comes waltzing around too often with that kind of money, and I think it would be an investment for the pond and Walpole's 300 water wheel on our town seal. We're a water town. We need to keep the waterways and the ponds, intact.
Thank you, Judy. Appreciate the comments. Who'd like to go next? Sure.
My name's Terry Hogan, and I own the property directly under the dam, below the dam. And my concern is that we've reported leaks. They've been working on this dam project for at least 3 years now, and every time they come out, we point out the leaks to them, and they've been progressively getting worse. One to the south side and to the Mansion Drive side. Years ago, I've had the property since '86. Years ago, there used to be a paint shop on the right side of the property as you come in the driveway. That is gone. They took it down when they put in the new sewer lines parallel to my property. After they put those sewer lines is when we started having a little pond, which is conservation considers it wetland now, but it never was. When they put the new lines in, I think they disrupted the dam on that side. Every time it rains, 2-3 inches, that pond would go up. And it'd actually overflow onto our property and would run pumps to get it down low enough so the people parking there wouldn't have to walk through a stream. The wintertime, it's even worse because when it overflows, it becomes a glacier. And we have to bring people in to sand the parking lot on both sides so no one's gonna fall. So it's a liability for me there. When you had the last meeting here, the people that represented the state and the engineers that are doing it, we asked them to come out and look at these leaks. And 3 years ago, they said, no, they weren't leaks, there was groundwater. Now they agree that they're leaks. And we asked, well, is there any way you can lower the dam a little bit? Because as soon as we get a heavy rain, the pond goes up, the leak gets worse, and the pond on our property fills up. Now, when we get a half-inch of rain, because everything in Walpole drains to the Neponset River. All the dams you're talking about, the one on Washington Street, the Allen Dam, all those little streams run into the river. So obviously, when you get any kind of rain, everything's draining into that river, and the dam goes up quicker. Now we're getting the leaks when it's even down a little bit. So we asked them, people to come out, and they looked at the dam, and we said, can you remove one board so it'll drop down a little lower so we'll get away from these leaks? So they said, well, we'll just crank open, there's two screws on top of the dam that open up round plates at the bottom of the dam. So they tried opening them, and one of them almost fell over. There's nothing on the top of the walkway. They don't work. So they said, well, we'll get in touch with conservation, see if they'll allow us to take a board out until we fix the dam, or 2 boards, or whatever they needed to solve the problem. I haven't heard from anybody since then, so I talked to the lady, Jennifer Doyle, and she said that she hasn't heard about removing the boards from anybody. Of course, she's just the engineers. But they had a technician out that goes around all the dams in the state, and he said, yeah, I can take those out, but I'd have to cut them out and catch them before they go into the building, because nothing works down there anymore. So I'd like to see whatever process there is to move quicker if possible, because of, I think the failure of the dam is getting greater from the sides. Every time the water goes up, we get more water, and it's getting progressively worse. So,
Thank you. We appreciate that input.
Thank you.
And your input in November. I just wanted to mention, because Mr. Hogan has raised a couple of, concerns there that I think need a little further elaboration. So we are aware that those leaks are occurring, and this is part of the reason why DCR is pushing us as hard as they are to get to an answer. And it's part of the reason that we are moving to get an answer to them by the end of May, which they have asked for, because we're aware that there are real structural issues with the dam. So that is not news to us, and it is something that is, we don't own the dam, but we, as good stewards of the town, recognize that something needs to be done, and now is the time to do it. So we're moving forward quickly as we get to the end of this over the next month or so, and we'll be addressing that in one fashion or another. Rick and Carl, you guys may want to go and take a peek at what's happening there and see if there's anything we should be offering up, and perhaps we should be following up with Jennifer Doyle and all that, because I don't want to see anything terrible happen there, so. Who wants to go next?
Jim,
Yes.
could I add one
Yeah,
comment?
go ahead,
So
Mark.
the other thing that I would add is, this is going to be a state project, not a town project. So it's going to take many, many, many years. They'll have to go through the engineering phase, and they'll have to go out to bid. So it's not going to happen quickly. I just don't want to set a false expectation that once we decide something will happen in a year. We're very unlikely to even get to through the design phase in the first year. Again, that's just my opinion, but this is a multi-year effort, so.
Thanks, Mark. Come on up.
My name is Bob Hardcastle. I live at 36 Rose Court Way, so I literally abut the pond about 30, my deck is about 30 feet off of it. So I would like to see the pond stay. Modified spillway sounds like a great solution. I hope that happens, but the reason I wanted to come up and talk was to reinforce some of the concerns that Glenn had and that the Conservation Commissioner or lady had. And it sounds like a disaster that's coming, as I see it, in that if we get away from the pond goes away, and now we have this land that is privately owned, and like Glenn said, I saw those same pictures of this beautiful rendering of all these plantings, everything was great. I'm just afraid that if the right influence isn't put into this, that's just going to be one horrible, stinky mess, like you said. It's just, the invasive species that are on the other side are very invasive, but I'm more concerned about the stuff that would grow in that muck that's sitting there. And the fact that it sounds like it's privately owned, and, and the state will come in and reroute this and turn it into a river, and then they just sort of walk away. That's my big concern right there, if we go that path, which I hope we don't go anyways. So I just wanted to reinforce that.
Thanks very much. Appreciate your comments. Who else? Yeah, come on up.
Sorry, I wasn't around for the November meeting.
That's okay. Welcome. Could you give us your name?
Oh, Marilyn Kelland.
Yeah, thank
I live
you.
on Pleasant Street.
Welcome.
My question is, what does does the state want to turn it into a river? Is that their go-to?
So I wouldn't want to speak for the state. They have said that they want to hear from us in terms of what we would like to see happen. One of the options they have put forth is the return it to a river option. I will tell you, again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the state, but I will tell you that in the dialogue we've had with them, it would seem to me that that is their preferred option if they were to make the choice.
If they do that, we get rid of the dam at Bird Pond, what's happening to the next dam downstream? Are we now then going to put pressure on that and then have an issue with that dam?
So, I don't know that we're able to answer that question. We could take it as a question and again, capture your input and get an answer on that. But I wouldn't want to try to address that, and I don't think anyone on the board would like to try to address that. It's really up to the state, and it's as part of the overall design process.
I personally would like to keep it as a pond as best we can.
agree.
And I feel for the poor gentleman who owns the property on top of it, the problems that arise there. And yeah, it definitely needs to be addressed. And yes, it has been a long 30-some-odd years that we've been doing this, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much for being here. Anyone else? Yeah, come on up.
Jim, just while he's walking up.
Sure.
If anybody hasn't watched that other meeting or were unable to attend, it's on Walpole Media's YouTube channel, so definitely check it out, or if you've forgotten what was talked about, they did answer some of those questions the DCR did, so go back and check that out on YouTube if you'd like.
Thanks, Ben. Hey.
Hi, I'm Pete DePasca. I live on Beethoven Avenue in Walpole. I was formerly the environmental compliance manager at Hollingsworth and Vos. One of my responsibilities, they own seven dams, of which 4 are in Massachusetts, and one of my responsibilities was overseeing the dams. What they have at the East Walpole Dam, right across the street from the Bird Pond Dam, is that they have a dam there with a drawdown procedure. What they would do every year when they have to inspect the dam is that 24 hours before the inspection, they would open up what they call mud gates. These are gates, they're like, it's like a gate, with a valve on top, and it's below the water level. They would bring the water level of the pond down, do their inspection, and then when they want to bring it back up, they would close the gates back up. Right? And they would also do that if they were expecting a really heavy rainfall. They would say, we're going to bring the pond down, because if the pond got too high, they would get some water in the basement. So they said, let's bring the pond down, and that's what they would do. In the 5 years that I worked there, they never had to do that. So it's not something that happens frequently, maybe every decade or so maybe that they would have to do that. But that's the kind of a procedure that you could have at the Bird Pond Dam, is that if you keep the dam, repair it, and like other people said, have a way to control the level of the dam so that when you are going to have one of those big rainfalls, rather than just, the other option, right, we're talking about is removing the dam and designing something and just crossing your fingers saying that it's going to be good enough for any type of scenario. Here, when you have a heavy rainfall, bring the water level down, by opening up the mud gates, increase the capacity of the dam to hold that extra rain. When the rainfall is over, you close the gates, and then everything goes back to normal. That way, the Rose Court Way people have their pond, the people in the Humble Pie buildings don't get flooded out, and I think it's a win-win for everyone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the input. Is there anyone else who would like to offer input? Sure.
I just want to prove one thing, that
Come up to the mic,
in the
please.
summertime, when we don't have a lot of rain, not like 2 summers ago, the pond that I mentioned, the dam level drops down, and you just see a trickle coming over the spillway. At that point, that little pond that I'm talking about dries out completely. Proves the theory that when the water is up in the dam, it's leaking by on that side. And I've owned this property next to the dam now since '86. I've only seen BOSI's drop it down once in that time. They drop it down every year for maintenance or inspection. And the last time they did it was last fall. They brought it down. We had a heavy rain, no flooding. And then it just let it fill back up again. It fills back up in a day, so. There was supposed to be a coordination when I think there was a Neponset River Watershed Authority. They were going to come around and lower these dams before the storms. Of course, the weathermen are right half the time, so they don't know what to do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to wrap us up now. A couple of just closing remarks, and I'll open it up to the board for other closing remarks. But first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and for being with us in November when we had the big, long discussion on this. It is very helpful from where I sit, to hear from the people who are most affected directly, as many of you are the abutters around this pond. It is a beautiful pond, and it is a pond that has been part of our history for a long time. That said, it's also a very dangerous situation right now, and it's one that we have to work with the state and tackle. This is not an easy question to answer, and I'll go back to what Ben said a minute ago. Go and watch that November meeting that we had and listen to the presentation that DCR did, and they'll talk through the scenarios that they have modeled. This is a dangerous situation in my mind, and one that we do need to deal with. We as a board are going to have to take the input from all of you, from our department heads, from DCR, use our own common sense, and come to a conclusion here in terms of what the future of that dam is going to be. And we need to do that by the end of May. So the process going forward, because you're probably wondering, well, what does that process look like? We have a meeting scheduled in this room again next Tuesday night. We are going to talk about it in terms of the options, the pros and cons, and the unanswered questions that we still have. Glenn raised a number of them tonight. We heard some from the audience, and we're going to capture those unanswered questions. And in the 4 weeks after next Tuesday, the goal is to make sure that any of those hanging chads are answered. On May 13th, our goal is to actually take a vote on what we will do with this dam and what we want to recommend to DCR. they have asked us to get back to them by May 30th, so our reason for the 13th is because it gives us a couple, 3 weeks to take whatever decision the board makes and put it down on paper as a good recommendation to DCR, including things like, as Glenn points out, the upland things upstream things that we need to be considering. So we wanted to give ourselves enough time to make sure that what we put together is well thought out, that, answers the questions they're asking us, and make sure that those things that we consider to be highly important here are captured and, formally included in what we send back to DCR. So that's the way it's going to go. Recap on that. Next week, we will debate this, discuss this as a board, right here in this room, starting at 7 o'clock. On the 13th of May, we will ultimately vote. We'll close out any residual discussion and take a vote. And we will respond back to DCR by May 30th with our recommendation. So just so you all know what's going to happen in the weeks ahead. And obviously, if you have any questions for us, please contact us. We're happy to, work with you on this in any way we can. Again, it is a very difficult and challenging situation that we find ourselves in. I hope you appreciate that. Let me open it up to the board for any closing comments. Mark?
I'd make one comment. Marilyn Kellen asked a question about, are we meaning the DCR as well as us, considering the downstream impact? I believe we asked that question. I'm going to go back and watch that video just to see, but I think their answer was that that's outside the scope of what they were looking at. So they were really looking at this one dam, because I know the discussion came up about the Washington Street Bridge as well, leading into the Hollingsworth and Vose. So I'm going to go back and listen to what they said, but there was a little bit of discussion, and it was sort of outside their scope, so.
Thanks, Mark. Others? Glenn?
I think it's a good process that you've outlined. I don't have a lot more to add, other than to say that as we revisit all this next week, I think there may be some there are some open questions, and I do think that some of this is a dialogue with the state, of course, right? Amongst ourselves, we want to decide what we want to do. We've been given some options. But it is somewhat of a negotiation, and there are some questions that need to be asked and answered, and whether we do it in an email or whether they come here and visit with us. So I guess my question is, will they be here next Tuesday? Do you know? Or have
It
you thought
hadn't
about
been
that?
our intention to do that, but if it's the pleasure of the board, we could certainly ask them to be here. I'm certainly open to it. What I don't want to do is have them come here and just re-say everything that they've said in the meetings that have been with us, so.
And maybe they could watch this meeting too and get a sense of what folks here were saying and what we've been saying.
Yeah.
And if anything else comes up between now and 7 days from now, we could certainly bring that to the meeting. I don't want to surprise them. It's not an ambush. It's a conversation that I would like to have. Again, an email is fine, but I think a face-to-face. I know they have come here in the past, but now we have more information. We feel like we've developed sort of a conclusion to this, and maybe we need to talk to them again
Fair enough.
face-to-face.
We could certainly do that. Anyone else?
I would just comment on what Glenn just said. I think this will end up being some sort of a negotiation, because what we may decide is best for the town of Walpole may not be exactly what they want to do. So, and one of the, we had asked a question along those lines to the people from DCR who came, and they basically implied that they only had the authority to go so far, and then they have to bump it upstairs. So I fully expect that whatever we ask for will not be something DCR can directly agree to, and there will be some sort of a negotiation, So, we've all talked about what we'd really like, and I think that what we ask them for may be what we want, but it may not be what they want to give us or spend the money on. So I fully expect that, although we said we'll give them our answer by the end of May, there's going to be more work to be done on this over time. So I just want everybody to know that, and we'll keep working on it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Anyone else? All right, again, thank you all for being here. I'd like to also thank all of our department heads for their diligent work on this and for being here to answer questions tonight. I think you've all done a very fine job. Jim, anything you would add before we close out?
No, I just checked the website. We do have a section of our website dedicated to this. So all I typed in was DCR Bird Pond Dam. The town's website came up, and then the mass.gov DCR website came up. And the question portal is in there. So if you have any specific questions of DCR, that's still open when I click on it. So you can go in there too. That's it.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
All right.
You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting.
So we're finished. So if you, thank you again for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks.
Sorry, I didn't actually ask to sign up to do that. Was there questions afterwards that she from? I'm from Hollywood Hills, and we had our own meeting with the DCR with regards to the various applicants. Just want to make sure we're happy to do with whatever the town wants to do. The reason why they didn't address downstream so much, which is where we are, is because it has almost no effect to downstream. A lot of the flooding that you're seeing is actually coming from Washington Street. So if you lower it over down, it doesn't change the water that flows from here.
I forgot that we had website already.
It won't affect our water.
I found it, yeah. So just that, yeah.
And I think we don't want anything that we do to affect you. The worry right now is if, with the current dam, the 500-year storm came, it could fail, and then Washington Street Bridge has a problem, and you have a problem, and
We'll have a lot of
Walpole has, I mean, no one has a
That's
problem.
dangerous as well, but I just wanted to let you know that we had a meeting with DCR recently, they gave us our presentation, the same one they shared on November. We talked amongst ourselves and basically came to understand that whatever the town wants to do will be fine with us. I will say though, with other people concerned about if it does shrink to a river-like, riverine type thing, and there's the Massachusetts River waterway setbacks of 200 feet. Nothing can be built in them, doesn't matter who owns it, so.
We have heard that, yeah.
Does the town have
So
something to
I need to move it because we're actually still in the meeting. so-
Could you do me a favor, though? Give Aoife your phone number and your name, just so she can contact you?
Could I just ask everybody to take the conversation out in the hallway because we've got some further business to conduct here? Okay, so we're well past the 7:30 point for open forum. Is there anyone here for open forum? Okay, let's continue. We already dealt with the town meeting articles, so on to the consent agenda.
Are you here for open forum?
Well,
We'll be adjourned in a few minutes if you'd like to hang around and speak with some of us. You can't speak to us as a board. You can.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, thank you. Okay, consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items as listed on the April 8th agenda.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0. In a minute, town administrator's update. Jim?
Sure, just a few items. Town meeting, as we get closer, we're working on just a couple of items just to close up town meeting, get ready for it. Stephanie sent the booklet to the printer last week. It's going to be delivered to the postmaster by Friday. RTM packets are going out on Friday. Motions are just about done. FinCom public hearing April 17th. Health insurance agreement from last week is signed, sealed, delivered. Everyone, all the parties signed off on it. Open enrollment's going on now. The health fair was held today. Maya, the representative from Maya, was at the health fair today, and she told me she was impressed with how smoothly the negotiation process went with our employee bargaining groups. And she shared that she witnessed some very challenging negotiations with some other towns this spring, and kind of used Walpole as an example as to how what's the right way to do it and how to pursue it with your bargaining group. So that was a nice kudos to the board and everyone involved. And building department, just one last note, they get a $45,000 grant from the state to purchase a drone to help them with some of the large-scale projects, specifically the solar inspections, some new tablets. So I know Representative Rogers announced that this past week. We were notified, and the paperwork's already been sent back to the state, so we're working on that.
Okay.
That's it.
Any questions or comments for Jim? I had one thing, and I'm trying to remember what the heck it was. I can't remember. If I think of it, I'll let you know. All right, could I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5-0, we're now adjourned. Thank you, good night.